You're tuning in to the Black Hollywood Live Network, featuring news, interviews, and commentary on all things Black Hollywood. Hollywood redefined. From Los Angeles, California, presented by Maria Menounos and streaming live thanks to Akamai Technologies. This is Black Hollywood Live. Justice is served. Featuring the week's roundup and commentary on legal news. Black Hollywood Live. Hollywood redefined.
You're listening to Black Hollywood Live.
And now, the host for Black Hollywood Live, Justice is Served.
All right, guys, welcome to Black Hollywood Live. Justice is Served. I am your host, Ebony K. Williams, along with my lovely co-host.
I am Mari Fagel. Of course, this is the show where we break down all the week's headlining entertainment legal news.
Absolutely. So we're just jumping to a really kind of sad story for our case of the week this week, Mari. Just this last Friday, the passing of 2-year-old son of football MVP Adrian Peterson. The 2-year-old passed away at the alleged hands of the boyfriend of the mother. Apparently, the mother and 2-year-old boy moved in with this 27-year-old man, man named Joey Patterson. And the story goes that the mother stepped out for just moments, and in her absence, Patterson was alone with the 2-year-old, called 911 alleging that there was a choking incident. When the authorities came to the scene, they said that the injuries really weren't consistent with accident. They said that they kind of noticed some maybe blunt force trauma and some injuries to the head. They took the boy to the ER. He was in very critical condition and ultimately succumbed to his injuries the day after. So very, very sad story there. Initially, Patterson was charged with aggravated assault on an infant and aggravated battery, but now, of course, the boy has passed on, so we expect to see those charges escalated, and he's currently being held on $750,000 bond. I have to say, though, Mari, what really struck me about this is not Patterson's first time dealing with these types of issues. This guy, the judges asked for an activated sentence on something that was suspended. This guy's already been convicted of battery and assault of an ex-girlfriend and her 3-year-old son. He beat that boy so bad he needed ice for his injuries, and then he attacked the mom when she had a visceral response to that. So this guy, already had a conviction on his record for this type of domestic abuse against a child, and now this really sad outcome. Your thoughts, Mari?
When I saw the prior conviction for attacking another child, that's when the bells went off in my head, and I thought, this is not a good guy. There is a lot to this story. What will be interesting to me is whether the prosecutors will be able to get evidence of this prior conviction in, because
it's tough.
It's tough to get these prior convictions in. It's under evidence rules very, very limited unless he were to bring some sort of character evidence of his good character in. So it'll be interesting to see whether jurors will actually know about that, because in my mind that shows a propensity for someone to attack children and women. And what I think is interesting also in this story is where Adrian Peterson himself fits in.
We're going to get to that, Mari. I don't want to cut you off, but you make a good point in terms of the likelihood of that prior bad act coming in. And just want to break down for our viewers and listeners kind of what's going on with that. Because for a lot of people, that would seem like common sense, obviously. And I get that. But the other side of that, where the judge is going to be concerned, is something that they call prejudicial effect. And that is that many jurors will hear of you doing something in the past and assume that you've done it in this particular instance. So a judge has to weigh that prejudicial effect against, the side of that, which is it is consistent with the prior bad behavior. So that's kind of the weight that the judge has to deal with there.
Yeah, like I was saying, a prior conviction for a very similar incident of attacking a toddler shows a propensity or a likelihood to do this again in this instance.
Sure.
So that would help, prosecutors to get him convicted. But like you said, that's very prejudicial because jurors listen to that and they tune everything else out.
Very much so.
And they say, this guy, because he's done it in the past, he did it again. And that is the prejudicial effect here.
Yeah.
But
if you're the defense lawyer for this Patterson guy, you're going to make the argument that that's unreasonable and certainly too prejudicial, and that your client should be tried on the facts of this particular case. So that's going to be that counter argument.
And then in terms of where Adrian Peterson fits in, at first there was misleading reports. They thought it was his son that currently lives with him, and
Right.
it was not. It turns out it's a son who lives in Sioux Falls from, and we'll talk about this term because people have been talking about this term, from a baby mama, a girlfriend of his. And this, unfortunately, a very sad incident has become very racially charged and has become very focused on who he was as a father, and I think that's not where the focus should be. I want to read some quotes from this New York Post article by Phil Mushnick called "Being a Great Player Doesn't Make Adrian Peterson a Great Guy." He says, quote, "With his resources, how could Peterson, the NFL's MVP, have allowed his son to remain in such an environment? Did he not know or not care? Or did he not care to know or not know to care?" Finally, he says, "Maybe Peterson's son is just one more stands to reason murder victim, just another child born to just another baby mama, one more kid who never had a shot anyway. Maybe by now, even if we can't accept it, we can expect it," which is strong words in this article.
I would say so. And I think it's really a very presumptuous, because some of the facts that we know are that, first of all, Adrian Peterson did not even know biologically that this child was his until very recently. Those test results just came back within the last couple of weeks. And the first time Adrian Peterson met this young boy was in the hospital when he was in, and again, just being aware that it is actually his son. So, and I'm sorry, I mean, the lawyer in me says I think that it's fair to wait for some type of DNA evidence to actually prove paternity. I don't think that makes Adrian Peterson a bad guy. And I just think this is really unfounded.
And also, people handle their grief in different ways. One of the reasons this article was written was because the author took issue with the fact that Adrian Peterson so quickly played right after, said he was ready to roll, and he played on Sunday night, even though the child died on Friday. People handle their grief differently. They handle things differently, and he wanted to keep playing, and I can't fault him for that.
Yeah, I mean, for some people, their work and throwing themselves into that is very much a part of their grieving process. And, I'm sure Adrian Peterson loves football, and that might have been something to give him some comfort during this horrible time of tragedy. And yes, his son died, but let's just, put our pragmatic, heads on here, Mari. This is not a boy he had a relationship with. So it doesn't mean that he's not grieving and, upset about the loss of his son. But let's not project the way we would handle this situation onto someone else who might be under very different circumstances.
Yeah. But this article really had a lot to say.
Yeah, what were the comments like under the article in terms of the racially charged
People
aspect?
were upset with the way, he was characterizing the baby mama. People were upset with the way he was bringing race into it. And like I said, people handle grief in different ways. And so I think that was something people, but some people did agree with it, because also, this is a guy who, the problem is he didn't know. He didn't know this was his son. Had he known this was his son for 2 years, maybe it would have been an issue that he didn't do anything to take his son out of this environment.
Yeah. And also, not to put this on, I'm not trying to instigate a blame game, Mari, but at the end of the day, I believe that the mother is also the primary caretaker of the child. And this is a woman who, to me, if anybody had a responsibility to vet this 27-year-old guy who ultimately, they're saying, killed this young boy, it would have been her. I mean, she was the one that chose to be in the relationship with this guy. She was the one that moved not only herself, but her 2-year-old son in with this guy. And he had a prior criminal record that was public information. So let's not just put all of this on Adrian Peterson as well.
And the sad thing was she had just recently moved in with him. So it's a tragic story all around, because this death really could have truly been prevented, and
Absolutely.
it was not.
From many different places. Now, one question about the racially charged aspect, Mari. I do feel like, this is my personal opinion, I want to know your take on it, that baby mama does seem to be much more used in communities of color when you're talking about black and brown people. Your experience as a white woman, I mean, is it a term that you guys often use in your community?
I just think the term has different meanings to different people. I thought it was interesting when Kanye West got on stage after to announce Kim Kardashian's pregnancy, and he said, "This is my baby mama," and there was some conversation about whether that was disrespectful or not, because I think sometimes it has a disrespectful connotation.
I agree.
And that, to me, I think is the problem, because the word generally, it just means like the mother of your child when you're not married. So it doesn't, but for some reason the word baby mama has these connotations that I think are negative.
Do you think it has a cultural connotation? That's my a personal opinion question.
Not necessarily, because when you watch Teen Mom, they use I don't think it necessarily has a racial connotation. I just think it has a negative connotation.
Interesting. I tend to disagree, Mari, just from my experience. I do think that when I hear of unwed white mothers, especially my experience practicing family law in a courtroom, I would never hear that referred to in that way. But for some reason, I often hear in the case of when it's a black kind of defendant who hadn't paid his child support or whatever, I've heard lawyers in, proper court attire refer to the young lady in the courtroom, well, Your Honor, his baby mama's over there.
Yeah. But that's the problem I have with it, is the negative connotation.
Yes.
And so I don't care if it's a white person or a black person or a Hispanic person. I think that they need to stop tying it to
women in general. Well, I agree with you. I just think the frequency that it is tied negatively happens to be more often with minority communities. I just don't hear it as much. I have heard it on occasion, but not as much.
Yes.
Yes, Phil.
And also the person who's speaking right now is our wonderful producer, Phil Svitek, who is behind the scenes every week. Thank you for speaking finally.
Of course. Well, here's my take on it. When you say baby mama, that's very improper English, right?
Yes.
And so I think that's where the negative connotation comes from, and why I think it's stereotyped to a black culture is because of that fact of like, oh, they don't know correct grammar, so they go, oh, that's my baby mama,
because
you can't speak. Yeah.
It's almost slang.
But it's not the grammar that I have fault with. I have fault with, when you say baby mama, you mean, oh, this girl who I don't care about, who, she had this kid, and I don't know. But then when you say an unwed mother, like, I don't know. Do you understand what I'm saying?
But you're saying the same thing, though, Mari. If you say baby mama versus mother of my child, same definition, sounds and feels very different.
That's the problem I have with it, is it's the same definition, unwed mother and baby mama, yet for some reason, when you use this term, it has negative connotations, and that's what I think the problem with it is.
I agreed, but to Phil's point, I do think that it gets associated when you're talking about a lower socioeconomic class or minorities who have been oppressed and things of just this kind of subculture thing that goes on in our country. But we'll see. Interesting. Maybe that should have been our tipping point. That should have been our question of the week.
Tipping the scales.
Tipping the scale. Yeah. Anyways. All right. Moving on. We got some heavy stuff on our docket. Give us what we got, Mari.
Yes. So on the docket this week, we have several stories. First up is Aaron Hernandez's fiance pled not guilty to perjury on Tuesday. Prosecutors allege that she lied, that she destroyed evidence in the case, and that Aaron Hernandez asked her to destroy a black box. She left the house with a trash bag, and when she came back, the trash bag was gone. She told 3 different stories. She told some family members she was at the store. She told the grand jury she was getting baby formula. She told an uncle she was at the bank. She claims that she is not lying, and the interesting thing here, this is what I want to get your take on, Ebony. Her attorney says that her and Aaron Hernandez had a don't ask, don't tell relationship. So she was basically blindly ignorant to everything going on. It's not like she knew and she lied about it. She didn't know in the first place.
Well, I would say this. I would say that I always encourage the women that, because I had lots of girlfriends and wives of my criminal defendants come through my office, and I always would tell them, just woman to woman, the less you know, the better. Yeah. That's just so I don't know if that was truly the case between her and Aaron Hernandez. Maybe, maybe not. But I certainly hope for her sake that it was, because anytime you have any dealings with somebody in criminality, the less you know, the better. So that way, when you are called in by a grand jury or a prosecutor's office, you can honestly say you don't know. When you know and you lie, I mean, that's what you're going to jail for, is the lying. And
we have also before on the show talked about the privilege of being married.
Spousal privilege. Yeah, absolutely. And some people have estimated that this is what we're going to maybe see happen here, that before this thing goes to trial, which is about a year off, Aaron Hernandez will marry this woman. Therefore, she can assert, and again, it would be her, the person who would be testifying potentially, who would have to assert the spousal privilege. And the design behind that is that we here in America, we love marriage, and we don't want to make spouses have to say unsavory things about their significant other. But again, I think it's always important that Aaron Hernandez understands he's not the one that would hold the privilege in this case. It would be her. So if he pissed her off, even if she was his wife, she could still have the option to testify against him. I forgot about the
All
prisons.
right, so on to Conrad Murray. So he was sentenced in November 2011 to 4 years in prison for killing Michael Jackson. Yet he is going to be getting out of prison 2 years early. On October 28th, Dr. Conrad Murray will be a free man because of overcrowding in the prisons today, especially in California. He gets credit for each year served. So his sentence was cut in half. The problem here is not even just that. He wants to start practicing medicine again.
Yeah, of course he does. Of course he does.
And
Yeah.
now Conrad Murray, he had held medical licenses in Texas, California, Hawaii, and Nevada. The California Medical Board apparently, and I'm sure this will be the case, is saying no way will he practice again. They have made exceptions for doctors who have even killed patients in the past negligently, which is a different standard,
Right.
and patients who have, or doctors who have had drug problems, they have been able to practice again. Conrad Murray was to such a moral fault, he will not practice again.
Yeah, and that's a good distinction, Mari, and I think that's different. Versus, I'm pretty sure, I think it's Dr. Jan something. I can't remember his last name. But the doctor who was associated in the death of Kanye West's mother, Dr. Donda, was, he, I believe, 99% sure he is practicing again. He's been reinstated. But like you said, due to negligence in that case, very different than an involuntary manslaughter conviction.
Yeah, and I just think Conrad Murray is delusional. Like we said last week with Brian Panish, he is not taking the blame for what he has done. So how could you let a man continue to practice who doesn't see fault with what he did? He doesn't see fault with the fact that he injected Michael Jackson with so much propofol and then did not monitor him that man died.
Which is not even a drug that should be administered in the home anyway. That's what always just kind of bothered me, and also my
And
mother.
unmonitored.
Yeah, well, it's unmonitored. And again, that's a drug that should only be administered in a hospital anyway. That is not a drug that you just, IV somebody up within their home. So
I just want to quickly say
Yes.
also his appeal is still pending. Just because he's getting out of prison, he's still appealing the case. And I got to take a look at the appeal this summer, the briefs, and definitely interesting.
yeah, what do you know? Damn you, Phil. All right, moving
I'm
on.
glad you stopped me anyways because I'm not allowed to talk about it.
Oh, okay. All right, fine.
All right, so Soulja Boy next. This is going to be an interesting case. Soulja Boy's Bentley, one of his friends in January, was driving it outside of a Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles, hit a motorcycle. The motorcyclist was severely injured, and the Bentley sped off. I got to give the motorcyclist props here because Soulja Boy, or the arrest came down in May because this motorcyclist went back to the Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles, talked to the valet, and he said, "Do you know who this person who had this Bentley was?" And they connected it to Soulja Boy. The interesting thing is here, Soulja Boy, even though he was not driving the car himself, he could be held responsible for these injuries and held liable and have to pay damages for these injuries to the motorcyclist because of negligent entrustment. So, Ebony, in California, TMZ kind of brushes over these things. They say in California, the owner of a vehicle who gives someone permission to drive is responsible when the driver screws up. It's not as simple as that because you need to prove two things. One, that the driver himself was reckless, which hit and run.
That's kind of
Reckless won't be
obvious.
hard to prove,
Yeah.
but you have to prove that Soulja Boy either was aware or should have been aware that his friend was a reckless driver and gave him the car anyways.
That'll be
and
tough.
that is a difficult standard to prove.
Yeah, exactly, Mari. I mean, unless that this guy maybe has a prior conviction of something like that, or certainly some type of long-standing record of that, which I don't know.
Probably not.
Probably not. Exactly. That's a hard standard, that knew or should have known standard, because I mean, I've got close friends. I couldn't tell you what their driving records look like.
And even if my friend was a good driver, I lent them my car, accidents happen. I'm not saying the hit and run's right, but it's hard to prove that he knew or should have known that his friend was such a reckless driver.
Yeah, I just think in general that concept of holding someone accountable for the intentional or negligent actions of another person is very difficult.
We're going to be talking about that again in our tipping the
Yes,
scales of
yes,
the week.
yes.
But it will be interesting to see because the motorcyclist really did have some nasty injuries. What do you think of him going back to the restaurant?
Well, I'll tell you, the first thing that went in my mind was I was thinking personal injury lawyer, and I'm thinking
wants the money.
Well, that, and I'm like, the fact that they're gonna say the fact that you could get back on your bike and go back says something about the severity.
No,
of
not
your
right
injuries.
after. It was like this happened
okay.
in January,
Okay.
and then he
it
later
circled back
investigated.
okay.
So
Well,
I
that's
said
good.
props to him.
That's good.
But the thing is, it was a Bentley and it was Soulja Boy. So
Yeah.
if it was someone else, maybe he wouldn't have gone
Yeah.
through the efforts.
Bentley equals deep pockets.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Kim Zolciak, Phil, let's play your favorite song. Okay,
so
this
whack
is
anyway.
this is Tardy for the Party. Kim Zolciak's on Real Housewives of Atlanta star. Candy Burris, her co-star, sued Kim Zolciak over this song, claiming that Kim swindled her out of a huge chunk of the song's profits. Guess who her attorney was? None other than Real Housewives of Atlanta co-star Phaedra Parks. Kim Zolciak won the case, and the judge ruled in her favor because of jurisdiction issues. But Candy Burris, Kim claims that Candy sued her solely to gain publicity for her now canceled show, The Candy Factory. I have to admit, I don't watch the show, so Ebony, I'm going to turn to you to give your personal opinions on all of these characters.
Okay, the first thing I'd like to make note of is how much Kim Zolciak's wigs have improved. Because this is a hot synthetic mess, and obviously she stepped her game up wig-wise. Really, truly. Okay, first of all, I don't know when any of the Atlanta housewives are going to learn to not hire Phaedra. Because seriously, this is like the second or third time she's represented a fellow castmate and been unsuccessful. I don't really think it's obviously working out too well there.
Do Bravo producers like that
I
she's
think so,
representing them?
Because it's a good storyline.
Yeah.
It gives them more scenes, more footage. But yeah, not really working out there for Phaedra. I don't know. Maybe Kim, I don't really care for Kim, to be honest, but maybe she is onto something because nobody was watching that silly show Candy had, The Candy Factory. It obviously has been canceled. Perhaps this was. I mean, it's not.
But people watched her show. She had a second season.
Yeah, no, people did watch Kim's show and people love Nene's show. So people can have successful spin-offs from Atlanta Housewives, just clearly not Candy. But also, here's the thing. At the end of the day, it's not disputable that Candy is far and away the most talented of these housewives. She's an incredible songwriter. Obviously, Kim could not have had this little chunk of change she made from this without the help of Candy. So I do think some money was certainly owed, and I think she paid like a nominal amount. So at the end of the day, I do feel bad for Candy if she was financially shortchanged, which she probably was. So.
Yeah, Candy was a songwriter for several...
TLC, Mariah Carey. I mean, she's a Grammy Award-winning songwriter, so she's very legitimate in what she does. And I do think... she probably got the short end of the stick, but, if there's a jurisdictional issue, and again, I'm mad at Phaedra. Like, that, Phaedra. Just like, come on, get your life.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to an interesting story here. It's kind of different than our normal entertainment, legal news stories, but I saw this week and I thought it was really cool. So I wanted to get your take on this. The New Hampshire Supreme Court has a on-the-road program where they go to high schools and colleges for certain issues, legal cases that they think will resonate with young people, and they have the attorneys argue the case in front of them, and then they allow the students to get up and question the attorneys themselves.
Love it.
I think it is a fascinating program. This week, the New Hampshire Supreme Court went to a high school in New Hampshire, and the case was whether reading a text message while driving can amount to recklessness worthy of a prison sentence, because this man had been reading a text message while going to pick up his Chinese food delivery, and he went over the dividing lane, hit a car, and a teenage boy is now severely, permanently brain injured because of it. Now, in New Hampshire, there is a law against sending a text while driving, but not against reading a text. And I thought it works both ways. Not only does it get the students involved and shows them truly the dangers of texting while driving, it gives these judges who are older, I think, a new perspective, because one of the students got up there and he said, well, it depends on how long he was reading the text for. If he had only been reading the text for a second, but what if he'd been reading the text for 10 seconds? And I think it's a great way of getting students involved.
Well, I was going to say that too. Yeah, I think it's a great way of also getting them involved in the substance of these cases, but more importantly to me, the process, and getting them understanding, what a defense lawyer is, what a prosecutor is, what a judge is. For a lot of kids, Mari, especially, I guess this resonates for me. I was a first-generation college graduate myself. I didn't know a lawyer in my life until I walked into law school, and that is my true experience. I just, was fortunate that I had a mother that was an advocate for me. But for a lot of these kids, Mari, they don't know to aspire to be certain professions because they've never seen it. So this is an opportunity of exposure for them to really understand, wow, there's something other than being a pop star or an athlete that I could, go into. And so I think this stuff is great. When I was at Loyola for law school many moons ago, we had a class called Street Law, where we went into classrooms of underprivileged schools and tried cases, and also we did moot court teams, and the kids got to, and it's just great for that same purpose. So I'm all about this program. I think it's fantastic, and I think more jurisdictions should adopt it.
Yeah, I think it's not only just the process, but the cases themselves, because texting while driving is a huge issue now. It's only going to get bigger. Did you see those commercials for those watches now,
Yeah,
where you
it's so
literally just like
bad.
look up? Now I'm going to see people driving going like this. I mean, the technology right now is crazy, and when you combine that with driving, it can get very, very dangerous.
Okay, one last thing. Sorry, this statute is ambiguous. It should be a hands-free statute like we have
As
here in
opposed to
California,
sending.
and that would take care
Sending
of that problem.
versus reading,
Okay,
exactly.
moving on. Okay, sorry, had to cheat. Okay, so time for tipping the scales. So this is interesting. So this is actually sad. Another sad note. This young girl, Rebecca Sedgwick, leaped to her death after being cyberbullied.
A 12-year-old
She's
girl.
12-year-old middle schooler, I'm sure.
Her birthday's tomorrow. She would have been
She turned
13.
So sad. Allegedly, I guess, Mari, you were telling me before, she started dating a classmate's ex-boyfriend. The girl got all mad, rallied her little friend with her. So these two alleged cyber bullies are 12 and 14 themselves. Cyberbullied this girl to the point where she did commit suicide ultimately. So now the question is, the police have arrested the 12 and 14-year-old girls. They're considering moving on and actually filing charges against the parents as well. So our question to you, viewers and listeners, is that appropriate? Should these parents be held accountable legally for the actions of these 12 and 14-year-old girls?
And should the teens themselves be criminally charged for being mean girls? The problem here, and why it can be a more clear-cut case, because sometimes cyberbullying, this girl did commit suicide. She killed herself. So
Yes.
showing that these girls were the cause of her death can be difficult in cyberbullying cases of this nature. It's not as difficult here because one of the teenagers wrote on Facebook, yes, I know I bullied Rebecca and she killed herself, but I don't give a expletive.
Yeah.
So the two girls were charged with aggravated stalking. And this is the problem I have, is fitting these new problems that didn't exist in the past into older, more traditional legal concepts and laws. So now you have to fit cyberbullying into the traditional elements of stalking.
Right.
And that's why a lot of these states have passed cyberbullying laws in specific criminal and civil laws, because then it's easier. This is something that we have not dealt with. We weren't dealing with this 10 years ago.
Absolutely. Well, and that's one of the reasons I love the law, is because it's constantly evolving and it's constantly changing
But
for the
it's-
times.
it's
But
usually a
always
little
behind.
slow.
No, it's always behind, Mari.
Yeah.
It's always behind. But that's the nature of life, and that's okay, because I think that once we construct the statutes, it can be specific to the elements, as you're pointing out, so that these cases can move forward. I guess for me, this is a kind of a no-brainer. I mean, I think there's going to be enough cases for the prosecutors to show that these 12 and 14-year-old girls should have, maybe you didn't know, but you should have known that this type of language, this type of cyberbullying could very likely lead to this type of consequence, because there's been hundreds and thousands of cases of this type of thing happening.
But what about the parents? I thought it was interesting because this happened in Florida. Mark O'Mara, George Zimmerman's attorney, is trying to get the law passed to hold parents responsible. And he, this morning, was saying that, there are laws in place where if a child takes a parent's gun and kills someone, the parent can be held
That's true.
responsible.
That's
If
true.
a child takes the parent's car and kills someone, the parent can be held responsible, negligent entrustment, like we talked about. He says, the parent should be aware of this, should be monitoring the children's internet activities, and should be aware of this, and they should be held responsible. I think that is a leap. And I just think we need to get to the root of the problem with cyberbullying.
But isn't
After-
but there's
after
an
the
argument
fact-
that the root of the problem, Ari, is parenting. I think there's an argument to be made that at the end of the day, if parents are doing their job and teaching their kids values, because I know I wasn't allowed to pick on other kids, period, point blank, end of story. If something like that had gotten back to my mom, I would have gotten beaten home by her. So,
The problem is that nowadays this bullying carries outside of just your school day, and it follows you all of the time because these kids are on social media. The parents of the child who wrote that on Facebook said we knew she had a Facebook account. They're claiming there's no way she could have done it because the time stamp of when the status was sent was during a time where she doesn't have a computer in her room and she didn't have her mom's cell phone. So they're claiming that she couldn't have written the message, an alibi of sorts. I do think parents need to monitor children's online activities, but what is scary to me is that this bullying doesn't end at school.
Right.
And that is something that you or I never had to deal with, because if we were bullied, it happened, and the second recess was up at 3 p.m., or, you know, the school was done at 3 p.m., it was over. But now these kids go online and it gets even worse, and it's...
I don't know. I guess I'm old-fashioned, Mari, and I think it's even deeper than the cyber aspect. I think
the cyber aspect really
But I'm talking about
everything.
character of kids, Mari. I'm not talking about whether it's, I don't think it's right any time of the day. And I guess I'm talking about not just monitoring your kids' online activities. Yes, absolutely. I'm talking about raising better kids.
But you want to know the
kids.
difference with cyberbullying and why I think that it's worse is because it can be anonymous. Because when you hide behind the mask of a computer, you will say things to someone that you would never have the guts to say to them face to face. And that is a problem. And that's why I think bullying is even worse now, and why we're seeing so many of these deaths. So I do agree it is for the parents, but these after the fact laws to criminally punish these teenagers, it will help, but not as much as getting to the root of the problem. And right now is Cyberbullying Awareness Month. October is Cyberbullying Awareness Month. And these are conversations that we need to be having, that parents especially need to be having with their children. And how far do you go in terms of monitoring them? What would you do? Would you monitor your son or daughter's Facebook, Twitter, all of that?
First of all, they wouldn't have any of that stuff, Mari. And I'm sorry, I was brought up the old school, and it is what it is.
If you think they can't get those accounts.
They can get the account, and they can do that. But again, I guess I'm talking about instilling character traits into kids, because you're right, you can't monitor what they do 24/7.
Yeah.
So I'm talking about instilling a sense of consciousness and accountability in these young kids to where they wouldn't do this even if they had access.
Yeah.
That's really the root of the problem for me.
But that should always exist with parents, and teaching your kids values and morals and how to treat people. And I don't know why now, because of the internet, these kids and the anonymity of it forget those values.
I don't think they're being taught them, Mari. That's me. I know too many parents that think this is cute.
What do you mean cute?
Okay, I'll give you a personal anecdote. I know someone, and she's a dear friend of mine, I love her to death. I heard her say that she told her daughter that if someone comes up to her at school and picks on her and makes fun of her outfit, which had been happening, this is a grown, educated woman, told her 4-year-old to tell the other child, that's okay because your mom's ugly anyway. So this is really happening, Mari. That's my only point, is that I think it's nice to assume that we're all at this level of character and consciousness. It's too much in my face that many of us are not operating under that. So when her little girl goes on to be a cyberbully, I'm not surprised, and it has nothing to do with her ability to monitor what her daughter's doing. No, you're teaching your kid the wrong thing.
I just think it's a lot easier to say, your mom is ugly online than it is to say it face to face.
But her daughter's doing probably both. She'll be doing both.
I don't know. I think a lot of kids have a hesitation with saying these things face to face, and they don't online. And the problem is the way technology is moving, it is difficult to constantly monitor what your children are doing.
I think we're saying the same thing, Mari, because again, I don't think you can monitor what they're doing. So therefore, it's about instilling in them just an inner compass of right and wrong.
Yeah.
Because, my mom didn't watch everything I did either, but I just knew where the line was, and I was accountable to myself.
Yeah. And so we do want people to weigh in. This is our Tipping the Scales segment. We want you to reach out to us online.
Absolutely.
On Twitter, at Mari Fagel.
At Ebony_K.
And tell us whether you think teens should be criminally charged, whether you think their parents should be charged and held responsible for the kids' actions. Reach out to us on Facebook. And as always, please go online on iTunes, rate us 5 stars, comment. We love your comments. We will always respond to them. Go on YouTube, comment, and we will read them on air.
Yeah, and as you can see, we like the back and forth. So if you disagree with anything we've said here today, tell us that too. That's always fun. Awesome. Thanks, guys, so much. Thanks for tuning in. See you next week.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, Dario Kristen, and the entire BHL staff, we would like to thank you for tuning in to the Black Hollywood Live Network. If you have questions or comments, tweet us at BHL Online or email us at info@blackhollywoodlive.com. For more exclusive content, visit blackhollywoodlive.com. This has been a presentation of the Black Hollywood Live Network. The views expressed here are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of BHL or its owners or principals.